The Seahawks go into MetLife to play the Jets this Sunday, and Bryce, you had the opportunity to join Blair Yusko from Bubbs on Sports, and he's got a podcast over there in New York Jets based, and you had the opportunity to go on. He brought you on the show to break down our squad, to give those guys an insight of what to expect, and so how did that go?
It was great. I had a lot of fun with Blair on the show. He's got a really good platform over there. He's, very professional, has great insight on the Jets, the NFL as a whole. And yeah, man, it was a great conversation. So I hope everyone enjoys it.
Yeah. So guys, enjoy the preview show with Bryce and Blair. On the other side, the HawksZone Rundown.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. This is episode 435 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me, whether here on YouTube or on all the different audio podcast platforms. It is week 13. It is Seahawks week. Jets 3-8. Seahawks coming off of a big NFC West win over the Arizona Cardinals to get the 6-5 on the season and take control of the NFC West. And today, to break down all things from a Seahawks angle, we're joined by Seahawks analyst Bryce Coots. Bryce, thanks so much for coming on. How's it going, man?
Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to having this discussion with you and previewing this matchup. It should be a good game on Sunday.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Appreciate you coming on. Should be a lot of fun here. We'll break down, obviously, the offense, defense, get into all angles from this one from obviously both Jets and Seahawks perspective as we get ready for this matchup on Sunday afternoon out at MetLife Stadium. But I just wanted to start here. What are your thoughts overall on where the Seahawks stand, 6-5 on the season, of course, coming off of a huge win over the Cardinals, who going into that game were hot, coming off their bye week, big win at home. They now head out east. And then also just your thoughts from an outside perspective on where this Jets team stands, which has been a whole lot of turmoil and not many wins here in 2024.
Yeah, sure. So with the Seahawks, they're going through a transition this year. Obviously, we've moved on from Coach Carroll and that kind of long regime that him and John Schneider had put together for over 14 years here in Seattle. So coming into this, this season for me and for my co-host on the show, Ryan, we basically kind of looked at Seattle and said, hey, we want to see progress with this team. We want to see changes to the, culture, to the attitude of this team. Certain games that we used to lose, we want to be able to win them when they were close and, see that structure is changing. And we've kind of seen that, Seattle started 3-0 to start the year, beat some pretty bad teams, then kind of hit a bit of a slide there with injuries and just not fully, I think, committing to, at least player-wise, committing to Mike Macdonald's vision and what he wanted to see done with the team. And that's expected. He basically inherited a roster from what John Schneider and Pete Carroll had kind of put together with very few changes. We'd brought in Tyrell Dotson and Jerome Baker as linebackers to replace Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner. And so we kind of were in this situation where, what does this team look like? Everyone had told us we had a talented team. We had, Devin Witherspoon, Jackson Smith and Jigba that we drafted the year prior, and some other, very capable draft picks, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe. We had acquired Leonard Williams from the New York Giants. So it was kind of like, okay, can Mike Macdonald come in and a new coaching staff and really elevate these players? And so for that first half of the season, it was kind of a up and down roller coaster for us. We went through that slide. We lost to Detroit, the Niners. We lost the Giants in a game that we, really shouldn't have lost. And then, we kind of came out of our bye week here in the last 3 games and really have kind of hit our stride. It looks like defensively, at least. It seems the buy-in from Mike Macdonald's system that he's run in Michigan and Baltimore really has kind of got the guys playing at a high level. We traded for Ernest Jones and it's very kind of, there's parallels across to when Mike Macdonald's defense in Baltimore started to take off a few years ago. They traded for Roquan Smith. We were able to trade for Ernest Jones. And then we came out of our bye week. Connor Williams retired, who was our what we thought was going to be potentially our center of the future here and anchor our O-line. He retires. And then we, cut our leading tackler in Tyrell Dotson after we had just traded Jerome Baker for Ernest Jones. So you could see that there was certain things that probably over that bye week that had been discussed between Mike and John Schneider and that coaching staff of hey, we need to change some things here. I need guys that fit my scheme, what I want to do. And now you're seeing the dividend of that paying off for Seattle. They've got, big wins over the 49ers and the Cardinals here to get us back up to 6-5. And realistically, even the game we lost to the Rams, it's the first time we've ever held a Sean McVay offense to that kind of performance where they were struggling to move the ball. It was 13 points. We kind of gifted them the win in a way by, a couple turnovers by Geno in the red zone area. And then we kind of, hit our stride versus the Niners. We were able to secure a win in Santa Clara, which we haven't done for a while, and then come back home and really dominate the Cardinals. Yes, the score doesn't maybe look that way to the outsider, but you actually break down and watch the film. Seattle's defense was completely dominating the Arizona offense. And James Conner, who was a pretty effective running back going into that game, had, I think it was 8 carries for like 1 yard. Like, he was not able to move the ball. So yeah, it's been an up and down season, but it seems like it might be going in the right direction. And with what our remaining schedule is here, there's a chance for us to really kind of take a full chokehold on the NFC West and potentially win this division. So that's kind of what's been going on for the Seahawks. And my outside perspective on the Jets here, Blair, is basically like, I'm shocked that it's kind of derailed itself this much for you guys. Like, going into the season, you heard a lot of people saying that there was a potential, Super Bowl roster here. Aaron Rodgers was going to be healthy. That was the, missing link from last year. And it just looks like it's never kind of gelled there. Like, whether it's the Rodgers side of things or the, ownership, front office, just something's missing. It seems to just be missing on cylinders. And it's not like you guys are deprived of talent. You've got Gardner, you've got Williams, you've got a lot, Breece Hall, like Wilson, Devontae Adams now. So for me as a Seahawks fan looking over at that, kind of going, I don't understand how it's not lining up. There must be something, whether in that locker room or in that organization above the players, that's just causing some sort of misconnection between the rest of the whole organization as a whole.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to just, obviously, a lot of good Seahawks information there. I want to kind of start with the offense, start with the quarterback here. You mentioned there was a lot of moving pieces, of course, new coaching staff, all that stuff moving on from Pete Carroll in the offseason. The one constant over the last 3 years has been Geno Smith, kind of a resurgence in his career. And we just talked about it off air. There's been a couple quarterbacks now in the NFL currently that are really resurging, whether it's Baker Mayfield, whether it's Geno, whether it's Darnold. There's a couple guys that have really seen their careers take off after some bumpy starts early on. Geno this year, the interceptions are up, but he still feels like he's done enough, at least from what I've seen, to help this team get to 6-5. And you feel like here can potentially take off here second half of the season, or more so down the stretch here. But what have you seen from Geno so far this season in year 3 as the starter?
So from Geno this year, it's kind of been interesting because there's been a lot of conversation here in Seattle about what does Seattle do at the quarterback position? Does Seattle or John Schneider and that group love Geno Smith enough to give him a contract extension? For me with Geno, I think Geno's a very good quarterback. I think he's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL right now. For me, there's just a couple factors for me that worry me with Geno. One is age. As much as, people say, oh, he hasn't played that much, he doesn't have that wear and tear on him. Father Time's undefeated unless you're Tom Brady. Yep. He's the only one that we've seen that, and has been able to kind of push that and push it off for a bit. You look at even Aaron Rodgers for you guys. Yep. He's not the same Aaron Rodgers he was 5 or 6 years ago. And so with Geno, the biggest concern I have is there's two points to it. One is his turnovers in the red zone have gone up significantly. Last year, there was a stat that came out where I think he was a 46% completion quarterback in the red zone, which isn't bad. Like, most guys are in the 50s in the red zone area, but he was 15 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. This year, that number on interceptions has skyrocketed upwards to almost getting close to the double-digit area. A lot of his interceptions are coming in that area. We had the pick in the Cardinals game this weekend where we're up 13-6. We're driving. We can put a nail in the coffin, even with the field goal if we kick it there. He kind of scrambles out to his right. He has a first down with his legs, and he tries to do too much. And that's what it feels like with a lot of Geno's interceptions this year, is because Seattle lacks a running game, and it's very evident how much they do lack it. He feels he has to carry the load more and try and go that extra mile with a throw here and a throw there. And the problem with that is you don't want him to get hesitant, because later on in our game, with, 8 minutes left. He makes a throw that only few quarterbacks can make between three guys to DK Metcalf to convert a 3rd and long. And you don't want him to get gun shy because you got to kind of live with the good and the bad with Geno. So for me, I think Geno is the perfect quarterback for what Seattle is currently constructed to do, which is maybe be a playoff team. If we can get this O-line figured out, which is the biggest issue here in Seattle right now and has been for years, you might see Geno get better. I don't know if Geno will ever be a top 10, top 5 quarterback in this league. But I definitely think he'll be hovering around that, top 12 to top 15 range, probably at least for a couple more seasons.
Yeah, and you mentioned there early on kind of just wondering what his future would be. I guess what would be like your gut feeling on what happens with him beyond this season, how much longer he's potentially here in Seattle? Do you feel it's results driven? Do you feel it's like what he's doing, team's doing? How do you feel they end up ultimately making that decision?
It's going to be an interesting conversation over these next 6-7 games for Seattle. Because he is under contract for next year. It's not like he's a free agent going into next year, but his camp has come to John Schneider and kind of requested a, new contract due to, Trevor Lawrence and Tua and a lot of these other guys making $50 million, $45 million a year now. And Geno's kind of in his cap area of 25, which is what his market was at the time he signed it. Seattle's kind of in an interesting situation organizationally. I don't know if they have to give Geno a new contract. Now, the reason I say that is because you can theoretically have him play. He can hold out, but it's not in his best interest to do so. And for Seattle, they do have Sam Howell, who we traded for this offseason. So you could see Seattle go, hey, if the Geno sputters down the stretch here, doesn't finish off strong, we could just turn this over to Sam Howell, who's on a rookie deal for another year. And then even if we have to extend him, it's not going to hurt us as much in the long run. Personally, I think there's a conversation to be had that if what Geno's doing this year continues and he continues to be, kind of the driving force of the offense, that Seattle may extend him 2 years. So kind of add another year or two onto his current 2025 contract that ends. And that would push him to about 37 in his age, 36. And in that time period, I think Seattle will draft a quarterback. I think that's something that John Schneider has been pushing off, even though he says every year at the beginning of the draft how he'd like to take a quarterback every year like he did in Green Bay when he was part of the scouting department there. This year's draft class makes that interesting because of the lack of holes on Seattle's defense that need to be filled in the draft, that they may actually be able to take a quarterback like a Quinn Ewers, who's someone that's name's been thrown around a lot, or a Drew Allar, Jackson Dart type, and really let them develop. Then you're not forcing them in to start right away, and they can sit, learn behind Geno. And Seattle may carry 3 quarterbacks. They may carry Sam Howell again next year, or they may turn around and trade Sam Howell away and try and recoup some draft capital potentially in the offseason. Who knows? But overall, I think there's a pretty good chance Geno gets some sort of extension from Seattle. I don't know how long it will be for.
Yeah, definitely something interesting to follow. Now, moving on here to the rest of the offense, to some younger pieces. I want to start here with the running back room. This season, it feels like the run game for Seattle's not really gotten off the ground, right? Kenneth Walker's first 2 seasons was phenomenal coming out of Michigan State, 24 years old. It felt like he was primed for a huge year 3 season. And it really hasn't happened. Yards per attempt is down. Yards as a whole is down. He does have, 7 touchdowns this year, which is, top 10 in the NFL. But what have you seen from Kenneth Walker and even Zach Charbonnet, the games that he had to fill in for Walker when he missed time? It's going to be an interesting matchup. It feels like this could be a game for Seattle where their run game breaks out a little bit because the Jets, really up until last week, they were able to contain, or 2 weeks ago because they're coming off their bye, they were able to contain Jonathan Taylor for the most part against the Colts, but the week prior, they let James Conner and Kyler Murray run all over them. So they've had struggles this season against the run. Could be a week for Walker to break out. What have you seen, though, from this run offense overall this season, 11 games in?
So it's kind of interesting with Seattle. You've got two very drastically different running backs in Seattle between Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. You've got basically Ken Walker is your explosive edge setting kind of running back. He likes to get himself out to the edge where he feels he has more space. He really struggles to run the ball kind of right up where the gap or the hole is supposed to be. And it's gotten him into trouble. And it kind of happened, his rookie year in Seattle, the first half of it. He was very happy feet, would dance a lot at the hole and wasn't able to gain much, took more lost yards than, even net zeros. And then the second half of that season, he really got it driven into him to hit the hole hard and fast. And he kind of exploded the second half of that season. Now, this year, I think there's been a lot to do with the fact that Seattle's run game is kind of mixed. You don't know what they are. You don't know if they're a zone team or if they're a gap power running team. They kind of mix both of them. And I think a lot of that has to do with the offensive line. I like Ken Walker a lot because I see a lot of LaDainian Tomlinson in his skill set. He can catch out of the backfield. He's very shifty. He's explosive. I just feel for him right now, he has a tendency because the run game is so, what's the term I want to use here? It's very lethargic, that he's trying to make more happen than necessarily is there. And instead of just sticking to what it is and just pounding away and eventually he'll break it, he's trying to make bigger plays happen. Zach Charbonnet to me has been a major disappointment this year. Considering where we took him, which was in the second round, his big thing was supposed to be, he's a hard-nosed runner and he can pass pro extremely well. His pass pro has gone down this year. In our game against San Francisco a few weeks ago, he had a critical error where he allowed Nick Bosa to come in free and basically picked Abe Lucas off of Nick Bosa. And then even last week, again, he struggled with pass pro pickup. He can run the ball, but he's a downhill runner and he doesn't have a lot of breakaway speed. So in the sense with Seattle's offense right now, he doesn't fit the zone scheme and they're struggling to run gap power in a lot of ways with their offensive line. So Zach Charbonnet, you just see lack of production. So it'll be very interesting to see, like maybe this game against the Jets, like you said, they have an opportunity to kind of establish some sort of a run game. But when we're seeing 22 carries combined for the running back room for like 65 yards, it doesn't give you a lot of hope. And just a stat here with Ken Walker, like he has quite a bit of talent, but he only has 7 100-yard rushing games, and 5 of those came in his first year. So since that first year, and he's in year 3, he hasn't really produced. So that's, I think, a lot to do with the O-line. And I think it's just, sometimes him being impatient as a running back.
Yeah, and I want to get to the receivers as well, but you just mentioned the O-line there towards the end. I guess we can kind of jump to that. What have you seen from that group this year? I know there's been some struggles, but where overall do they stand, both from pass protection standpoint and, of course, run blocking?
Seattle struggles is a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
Seattle's offensive line has been putrid this year. Really, it has. Geno on average is getting sacked about 4 times a game. And sometimes it's on him for holding onto the ball too long, but a majority of the time there's just missed assignments. Our biggest struggle point now that we have Abe Lucas back really is our interior of our offensive line. We signed Connor Williams because they didn't believe Olu Atimi could actually be the center out of Michigan. Connor retired, and Connor didn't look good when he came back to form and played this year. He struggled anchoring it at the center position. And our guard play's been horrible. Anthony Bradford, he's supposed to be a run blocker. That's what he was coming out of, LSU as. He struggled in that. He's horrible in pass protection. Lincoln Tomlinson, who you guys have some, familiarity with, he's really struggled. He's basically a turnstile on pass downs.
Yep.
Rundowns, he can get in the way, but he doesn't really do much. The only thing he has going for him is durability. He barely ever misses a start. Bradford's now injured for Seattle. They just put him on IR today. I think he's done for the year with a high ankle sprain. It was a pretty bad looking roll up from our last game against the Cardinals. So we'll get to see our rookie Christian Haynes and our other rookie Sateo Lamea get a chance to start this weekend. Christian Haynes' struggling point is he's just not big, and he, I think, has a chance to potentially maybe move to center. But the biggest thing, Blair, for Seattle is they don't have a lot of veteran established players on that O-line, and it's really showing. And this is where John Schneider, I think was able, for a lot of his tenure in Seattle in the early on going of it with Pete Carroll, they were able to mask the O-line's deficiencies. One, when Tom Cable was there and they had beast mode, there was no rule in the NFL that you couldn't cut downfield. So they would run a zone scheme and their guards and their tackles would get dirty and they'd cut guys downfield, which would open up run lanes for Marshawn. The NFL put a rule in that you couldn't do that anymore. All of a sudden, Seattle started to struggle. And then the other part of it was Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson extended plays so often with his offensive line that it allowed you that ability to kind of say it's not as bad as it is. And it was basically putting lipstick on a pig. Now with Geno, who's more of a traditional pocket passer, you're seeing some of these deficiencies really come to light in Seattle. And basically the rug's kind of been pulled off and you can see the mess that's occurred. John Schneider needs to get this right. And it's something that a lot of Seahawks fans are hammering him for. And I think you can also see it in just the way that Seattle plays the game. There's a lot of drop back passes. They're in shotgun a lot. And I think it's a real indictment on how poorly this offensive line has been constructed outside of Abe Lucas and Charles Cross.
Yeah, I totally feel your pain with this one, especially with the Lincoln Tomlinson. He was not good here his 2 years. One of the biggest knocks on Joe Douglas was his ability to build the offensive line. Finally, this year, it feels like there's been some things that have clicked. Really, 4 of the 5 guys up front for us on the offensive line have done well, except Tyron Smith, who looks like his season will probably be ending. He'll hit probably the IR with a neck injury, which will allow Olu Fashanu to get an opportunity to start the rest of the way left tackle. But I mean, I think it was fitting that Douglas's first pick as a general manager, first round pick was a left tackle. And then 6 years later, his last first round pick was also left tackle. So in between that, trying to figure it out, obviously Tomlinson never worked at guard. And it's the same problems he's having in Seattle, as you described. Sounds very familiar to his time here in New York. I wanted to get to some more of the skill position guys. 3-headed monster here at receiver. Jets will have their hands full. DK, JSN, something about Ohio State, something in the water over there, just producing guys, whether it's Olave, JSN, obviously Garrett Wilson here for the Jets. And of course, Tyler Lockett, who's been around for a while, still doing some good things. Those 3 guys, 9 of Geno's 12 touchdowns have gone to those 3 guys. They've all been excellent. Feels like JSN this year taking a much bigger role. Actually, you know, I know DK missed some time, but over the last couple of weeks, he's kind of been like the number one. He's been producing the best. Just what do those 3 guys do every single week that makes it so tough for defenses?
Well, the thing this year that's kind of been nice is Ryan Grubb, coming from his background in Washington and them having a 3-headed monster there last couple of seasons with Zadunze, McMillan, and Polk.
Yep.
He kind of was able to walk into a perfect situation for a lot of his concepts because of Metcalf, JSN, and Tyler Lockett. Now, the thing that's been really interesting is Tyler Lockett's more of an afterthought now in this offense. He isn't nearly as effective as he's been in the past. Even up till last year, he was more effective. This year, he's kind of just fallen by the wayside a lot of the time. He last game had 2 catches for 19 yards, kind of roughly the same as AJ Barner, who's our rookie tight end. He isn't really as involved, and JSN's really taken that receiver 2 role, and in some people's minds, taking the receiver 1 role. I'm not willing to put him there just yet. I still think DK is receiver 1 on this team, and because of how he tilts a defense just based on his pure physical presence and what he's capable of doing. And it's really interesting because I think, there's a lot of conversation here in Seattle on whether or not you pay DK Metcalf potentially in this offseason. Again, he's still under contract, but there's a good chance he's going to ask for an extension. And, a lot of people are kind of balking at the idea of, hey, we can't pay this guy $30 million. He's not worth it. He's not one of the top 5 receivers in the NFL. Even during, the time that DK was out, yes, JSN had a game where he went off, but DK does so much with his presence on the field and how a defense has to play that he opens up space for other guys to be effective, JSN being one of those guys. In our last game, I think JSN had, 10 catches or so. DK still had 7 out of 9 targets. So he still was able to produce. JSN had over 100 yards. DK had 70. It's really turned into a 2 receiver offense in a lot of ways, even though they do play with 3 a lot of the time. But Tyler's just kind of there as an afterthought. Like, he makes the odd catch here and there and falls down because he's not much into the yak yards anymore. So for the Jets, it will be a challenge. And if the Jets, which they have a tendency to do, which is play a lot of man coverage, this team, when they've played teams that have man coverage as their primary focus, JSN and DK have shredded those teams, New England being one of them. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Jets decide to play this trio of receivers in Seattle.
I am curious, just on the topic of DK and the contract. He's obviously a beast. I've actually got both JSN and DK on the fantasy lineups this week. Just being out there, being close to the team, of course, in Seattle. Have you ever learned more about DK's whole diet, the whole candy thing? I know it's kind of an off-topic question, but I find it so interesting that he basically just eats candy and goes out there and dominates.
Yeah, candy and strawberry milk are his kind of two main things. Yeah. The more we've kind of been around the team and stuff, and you hear things, he's gotten a little bit better with it. This offseason, especially, he's kind of focused it in, but the man trains a ridiculous amount of his time and spends a lot of time making sure that he's in, peak physical condition. And he's kind of, alluded to the fact that, basically his cheat days are spent eating candy and strawberry milkshakes and so on. But no, he does a phenomenal job, taking care of himself. And he's kind of alluded to now he's doing a better job of it than when he initially came into the league. And I think that's why you see a guy like him sprain his MCL, which some guys would be out for a more significant period of time. And he's back after missing only a couple of games. So, that's one thing about DK that, I think people also forget, especially in Seattle here, because we're so close to the team, is his durability has been pretty phenomenal for a guy of his size. And his physical stature. You look at guys like Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones and the injuries that caused them to miss a lot of time over their playing careers. We're lucky that DK hasn't had that in Seattle yet.
Yeah, definitely. He's obviously just a menace out there for sure, and big name to look for here on Sunday. Once again, we're talking to Bryce Coots here, Seahawks analyst. Want to switch over to the defensive side of the football. We talked about it a little bit off air. There were some early season struggles. Feels like the last couple weeks have really turned it on. You mentioned it early on last week against the Cardinals, completely dominated. James Conner, who's having a career year, completely took him out of the game. Had the pick 6 against Kyler on that 4th and 1. What have you seen from the defense overall this season, and specifically over the last couple weeks, which, similar to Seattle kind of turning their season around, it's been led by the defense, obviously having some positive performances?
The big thing, I think, for Seattle, there's been a couple changes from the beginning of the year, personnel-wise, to now. We obviously have Ernest Jones. We have Tyrese Knight, our rookie linebacker that we drafted, playing. Kobe Bryant's moved into the other safety role opposite of Julian Love. And Josh Job's kind of taken over the third corner spot, which has allowed Devin Witherspoon to play a lot more in the nickel and in the slot, which has created some matchup issues for the defense or for the offense, I should say. And Draymond Jones has kind of come alive. They seem to have figured out how to use him. Hopefully they can redo his contract in the offseason, because they're paying him a lot of money for production, but not to what he should be. Leonard Williams has just been they finally figured out where to put him. And, for us, our two young edge players, Hall and Mafe, have really stepped up. A lot of it for Seattle, I think, is just they finally started to believe in what Mike McDonald on defense was preaching, like basically kind of the old mantra of do your job. They kind of went back in the bye week to their basics, and they really went back to their base installs and a lot of things. And it's allowed them, I think, to play a little bit more freely. They're trusting each other out on the field to be in the right spot and not trying to do too much. And that's where you see plays like Devin Witherspoon's this weekend, where he comes crashing in, is able to completely speed, turn, chase Kyler Murray and force Kyler Murray into an awful decision, which Kobe Bryant is then there to, reap the benefits of and take it back for 6. For me, Kobe Bryant's been a massive upgrade at our safety position with Julian Love. We started with Rayshon Jenkins this year, who we got from the Jaguars in the offseason. Kobe Bryant, we drafted. He played opposite Sauce at Cincinnati. He was one of the best corners in college football, opposite of Sauce. And when we drafted him, he was never going to translate to outside corner in the NFL, so they moved him inside nickel. He created a lot of forced fumbles his rookie year. And then last year, unfortunately, the injury bug kind of hit him, and they drafted Devin. So Devin took over as a slot, and Kobe fell to the wayside. And, a lot of people in Seattle were saying, oh, he's going to get cut this offseason. And I kept saying, if they move the guy to safety, he's got such a, smart football IQ. He knows how to be around the ball and get his, opportunities with it. They move him to a safety spot, it might be the best thing for him. And sure enough, they've moved him to safety. He's been starting there since week 7, and currently he's ranked as like one of the top safeties in the NFL currently. One defensive player of the week this week, which I'm not totally sure how he did considering how well Leonard Williams played.
Yeah.
But, you know, I list off all those names, and I'm not even talking about the guy that we took in the first round this year in Byron Murphy, who everyone thought was going to be a game wrecker. He's been kind of quiet lately. He's, you know, got a lot of double teams he's dealing with, but it's kind of been a good, I think, learning curve for him. He hasn't been asked to be the guy on that defensive front. They've, you know, had Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, and a bunch of other guys be able to carry that bulk of that weight for him.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Leonard Williams, another former Jet in this one. Obviously, Geno, Leonard Williams as well, spent really just former New York. I mean, he spent 5 years with the Giants, or more like 4.5 years with the Giants, spent 5 seasons with the Jets, getting drafted, obviously, in the first round of 2015. What have you seen from him so far this season? Of course, came over at the deadline last year. You mentioned it last week with the 2.5 sacks. Just what has he been able to bring to the table both last year and in this season? Of course, like you mentioned, successful week against Arizona.
Last year when we acquired him, he brought a certain presence to the interior of our D-line that Seattle hasn't had for years, I would say, honestly. We've never really had a game wrecker on the interior of our D-line. And he's flexible enough that you can move him around, right? You can play him coming off the edge. You can play him at the 3 tech, sometimes a 1 tech. You can even play him out as a 5 tech. So having his, you know, flexibility in that regard was kind of a unique thing for Seattle. Very Michael Bennett-ish when we had Michael Bennett here, but he's a little bit more physically impactful when he plays. The nice thing that I've seen this year, though, with Mike McDonald is how they're actually using him. Pete Carroll kind of got into a point if he was just a 3 tech and playing it, because at the time, you know, last year and the year before that, Pete Carroll had kind of switched off the 4-3, really moved into what Vic Fangio was doing with the 3-4 kind of look that he was moving to in a bit of a bear front kind of thing. And so it kind of put this weird stress on Seattle's defensive line because they had guys that didn't really fit what they were trying to do schematically. They had guys that were more accustomed to what they had played prior in Seattle in their 4-3 under and over kind of sets. But so the thing that's very interesting now is Leonard Williams is all over the place. He's really, I think they've really found a home for him, kind of playing the same role that Justin Menabikwe played for Baltimore last year. And, you know, you're seeing this last game against the Cardinals, even the San Francisco game, Leonard Williams was extremely impactful in the run game. You know, I can't even remember what his stat line was. It was a ridiculous stat line in this last game. He had, I think it was like 6 tackles, 4 for a loss, 2.5 sacks. Like, that's as much as a game-wrecking game you can have, and completely disrupted Kyler Murray all day. So Leonard Williams has had a huge impact, and leadership-wise too, he's made a huge impact in Seattle.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to get to as well the secondary here, because I know you touched upon it a little bit. Another guy that actually came over too from the Giants. Feels like this is a big New York reunion. And this one was Julian Love, obviously the safety. What have you seen from him this season? You know, what does he bring to the table? And obviously a guy that, you know, spent last year with the team as well.
So yeah, Julian Love was a very sneaky signing by John Schneider and Pete Carroll last year. We obviously last year we had Quandre Diggs. We had Jamal Adams, who we had actually got from the Jets. And Julian Love didn't really get on the field much until the team kind of figured out Jamal Adams couldn't be who he was prior to his injury. And, you know, Julian finally got to play more. Once Julian got on the field and was playing with Quandre and they kind of started becoming a tandem together, you got to see what Julian Love's capable of. And he's an extremely intelligent player. He covers a lot of ground. And he's a sure tackler in a lot of ways. And so that was the one thing for me when you know, they moved on from Quandre and Jamal this offseason. I was really interested on where they were going to play Julian. Where does he fit in what Mike McDonald did? And, you know, a lot of people wanted to go get Geno Stone this offseason from Baltimore, bring in a connection for Mike McDonald. And I was kind of maybe that happens. But, you know, let's see what Julian Love can do in Mike McDonald's defense. Maybe he'll use him. And I think, you know, Julian Love's a better overall player than Geno Stone, just pure athleticism and things he's capable of doing. And you've seen it. He, you know, there's a play in this last game on 3rd down where he comes flying across. He almost picks it on the sideline, which would have been a sure completion to Marvin Harrison Jr. He's flying around. He's doing a really good job of communicating. He's definitely one of the key communicating guys for this, besides Ernest Jones on this defense and getting guys lined up correctly. And you can see, like, he's played in the box outside of playing free safety, which he's played 429 snaps this year. He's played 145 of those in the box and in that area. So, he's definitely got his versatility. He's played 91 of those snaps at slot as well. He's kind of a jack of all trades utility knife, but he's really honed in as being the free safety in Seattle. And you can see now that he knows that this is his home, this is where he's going to be. You've seen that kind of take over in his play.
So as we kind of start to wrap things up here a little bit, just wanted to kind of go over, the whole roster once again, offense, defense, any under the radar guys that we haven't yet talked about or that you want to bring up that could make an impact in this game, any X factors and even matchups to watch as well heading into Sunday.
AJ Barner, our tight end, will be an interesting player this Sunday. He's really started to come on lately. If Noah Fant is good to go, he is kind of came in as what was going to be our third tight end in the preseason and everything. Everyone kind of thought he was an afterthought. He didn't look extremely athletic, but he was the youngest player at his position in the draft. I think he's only 22 years old, out of Michigan. And he's really come into become a really good blocker, which he was kind of known for, but his receiving skills have really picked up. And you've seen in the last couple of weeks, Geno's starting to go to him more in, crucial third down situations if he needs a conversion. So AJ Barner on our offensive side could be someone that could have a sneaky good day. The other guy on defense is Derek Hall. Derek Hall is, between Mafe and Hall, in my opinion, I think Derek Hall might be the better edge. Just overall, he's great in the run. He's such a strong speed rusher, which is something that we didn't really anticipate. We knew he could bull rush coming out of college, but his speed and edge has definitely picked up this year. And I think a lot of it has to do with the coaching because he was basically invisible last year in Seattle. So I think if Derek Hall and that defensive front have pressure Aaron Rodgers, make him uncomfortable, I think it could be potentially a very profitable day for Seattle on the back end with that secondary getting opportunities to, go after the ball.
Yeah, it feels like that's some of the biggest keys here every time against the Jets. It just you get pressure on Rodgers, not very mobile. Like you said, Father Time is pretty much undefeated other than Brady. You could start to see it here with Rodgers, although who knows, maybe return is still coming here in 2025. But definitely should be a good one. I guess overall, what is your level of optimism headed into this one from a Seattle perspective? I know from a Jet perspective, I definitely think the Seahawks will probably win this one, but I totally get that feeling right now of the trap game. I believe you guys have Arizona again next week too, right? So it's kind of like Arizona 3-8, Arizona again on the road, East Coast. Definitely, I get that feeling for sure.
I feel it could be a trap game for Seattle. If Seattle's defense can travel as well as it's played the last couple of games, they, went down to Santa Clara and play, which isn't much of a time zone jump at all for them. But if they're able to travel that defense and they're able to kind of come out and set that tone initially with their defense, shut down your run game, force Aaron Rodgers to be uncomfortable because they're able to create pressure, I think Seattle's offense might be able to kind of get in a bit of a groove. I do feel confident Seattle can pull us out. But I don't think it'll be a blowout like some people may think. I think it might be a closer game than people initially anticipate. Seattle's averaging, I think it is about 23, 24 points a game roughly this year. I could see them maybe getting to that potentially, but I don't think it'll be a situation where you're seeing some 42-6 score. I think this game will be a lot closer than people initially thought.
Yeah, it would be an interesting one for sure. And the Jets this season have been in a lot of close games and have found, unfortunately, ways to lose those games in a variety of different ways, whether it be penalties, turnovers, missed kicks. So we'll see what this week has in store. Any other closing thoughts? And as also really appreciate you coming on. And where can everybody find you? Your Twitter, your YouTube, all that good stuff to find your work.
So me and my co-host Ryan McMillan, we have the HawksZone Rundown podcast. We started that this year. You can find us on YouTube, all the audio podcast platforms. We'll have our preview show out probably on Friday night. It'll be up on our YouTube and, audio platforms, kind of previewing this Jets matchup. And then, that's basically kind of it from our end. Other than that, it was a lot of fun being on here. Love talking with, opposing podcasters and such on, the upcoming matchups that, our teams are going to face. So, it'll definitely be an interesting game on Sunday, and I think it'll be a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Really appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun. Always enjoy this as well. Everybody stay tuned. We'll have a lot more content coming your way as well here before Sunday's matchup against the Seahawks out at MetLife Stadium. Stay tuned. Appreciate you all for tuning in. And as always, JETS, Jets.
So yeah, that was our show, everyone. It was a lot of fun being over there with Blair. Definitely, gonna have more conversations with him in the future. Potentially joining his other show in the huddle that he has with a fellow partner over there. Ryan, it was a lot of fun. So I'm definitely looking to having more communication and Blair back on maybe on our show at some point in the off season to get his perspective. He's got a great wealth of NFL knowledge. So yeah, overall it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome stuff, man. Yeah, you know what? It'd be awesome to have Blair on the show in the offseason too, because I want to see where the Jets are with the whole Aaron Rodgers, situation, and because it's going to be kind of a storyline as the offseason unfolds. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of Pat McAfee appearances, and you'll know Aaron's around, so
Yeah.
be awesome to have a guy like Blair back on later in the offseason to kind of get his take and see where that's unraveling, because it's never really a dull moment. And I think some people are, like you said, on our previous show, sort of, maybe it's time to just kind of go off into the sunset or the dark hole or whatever he does, and just kind of like, enough's enough. So yeah, man, awesome stuff with Blair. Guys, again, make sure if you've been watching our channel to go down and hit the sub, share the videos, comment, like, all that stuff helps out the channel. So that's it again, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.